Good day, everyone. Today, I will talk about the Cold War. This was a time when powerful countries, which are called superpowers, faced off against each other without direct fighting. The main idea of Cold War is about economics and politics. Just like the United States and the Soviet Union had very different beliefs, and these differences led to competition all around the world. The conflicts between the United States and the Soviet Union changed many countries. These events helped shape the modern world we live in today. During World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union were allies. The Soviet army moved west while American troops moved east. They met at the Elbe River in Germany in 1945. After the war, their different political beliefs led to a long conflict which is called the Cold War. After the war, the alliance between the United States and the Soviet Union began to fall apart. Stalin signed a non aggression pact with Germany in 1939. He blamed the Allies for not attacking Germany earlier. But soon, both sides followed very different goals. In February 1945, leaders of the United States, Britain, and Soviet Union met at Yalta. They agreed to divide Germany into zones, but Germany would pay the Soviet Union. Stalin also promised to help fight Japan and allow free elections in Eastern Europe. In June 1945, the United States and the Soviet Union worked together again. Along with 48 other countries, they formed the United Nations. Its goal was to protect countries from attacks, and the UN is based in New York. The United Nations has a General Assembly where all member countries can vote. It also has a Security Council. Britain, China, France, the United States, and the Soviet Union were members and could veto decisions. The United States became the richest and strongest country after the war. It lost about 400,000 lives, but its cities and factories were safe. The Soviet Union suffered much more, and many people were killed or wounded, and many cities were actually destroyed. The United States wanted to spread democracy and stop communism. It wanted access to raw materials and markets. The US also helped rebuild Europe, create new markets, and reunite with Germany. The Soviet Union wanted communism to spread to other countries. It supported a worldwide workers' revolution. It also wanted to rebuild its damaged economy by using Eastern Europe. The Soviet Union wanted to protect itself from another invasion from the West. Because of its history and lack of natural borders, it feared attacks. This led to the idea of the Iron Curtain. The Soviet troops pushed Nazi forces back during the war. Afterward, they stayed in countries along the western border. These countries became a buffer or wall of protection for the Soviet Union. Soviet Union ignored the Yalta Agreement. Communist governments were set up in Albania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Poland, and Yugoslavia. President Franklin D. Roosevelt died in April 1945 and Harry S. Truman became the president. In July 1945, leaders met in Potsdam, Germany. At this meeting, Stalin refused to allow free elections in Eastern Europe. Europe became divided into East and West. Germany was split into two countries, which are the East Germany, which is called the German Democratic Republic, and West Germany, which was called the Federal Republic of Germany. Relations between the United States and the Soviet Union became worse. The US followed a policy called containment. This meant stopping the spread of communism by forming alliances and helping weak countries. The Truman Doctrine supported countries that rejected communism. The US Congress approved more than $400 million in aid. This help was given to Greece and Turkey. After the war, Western Europe was in ruins and faced economic problems. In 1947, George Marshall proposed a plan to help Europe. The plan provided food, machines, and materials to rebuild the region. The Marshall Plan was approved in 1948 and was very successful. Even communist Yugoslavia received aid from the plan. And in 1948, France, Britain, and United States combined their zones into one nation. In response, the Soviet Union blocked all access to West Berlin. To help West Berlin, food and supplies were flown in by air. This airlift lasted almost 11 months. In May 1949, the Soviet Union ended the blockade. Today, I will talk about how the communists took power in China. This topic explains the events after World War II and how China changed its government and society under communist rule. During World War II, China fought on the side of the Allies and won. However, the war caused great damage to the country. Japan occupied many Chinese cities and destroyed them. Between 10 to 22 million civilians died, making China one of the countries with the highest casualties. Even after Japan was defeated, China's problems did not end. China was already facing a civil war between the nationalists and the communists. When Japan invaded China in 1937, these two groups worked together for a short time. However, they still competed for power and control inside the country. The communist group was led by Mao Zedong. They were based in northwestern China. They also helped peasants fight using guerrilla warfare. They also taught people how to read and helped improve food production. Because of this, many peasants supported them, and by 1945, they controlled much of northern China. The nationalists were led by Jieshi. They controlled southern western China and were protected by mountains. Their army had about 2.5 million soldiers, and the United States gave them at least $1.5 billion in aid. However, much of the aid was lost because of corruption among officers. The Nationalist Army fought after a few battles against the Japanese. They saved their strength to fight Mao Red Army instead. When Japan surrendered, fighting between the Nationalists and Communists started again. The Civil War lasted from 1946 to 1949. The Nationalists had more soldiers than the Communists, and the United States also gave them nearly $2 billion in aid. However, the Nationalists failed to gain support from the people, and many soldiers left them to join the Communists. By spring of 1949, many major cities fell to the Communists. Mao's forces were well trained and disciplined. They promised to return land to the peasants, which made people support them. In October 1949, Mao took control of China and declared the People's Republic of China. After losing the war, Jiang Jieshi fled south. The nationalists moved to the island of Taiwan, and at that time, Western countries called Taiwan Formosa. Mao's victory increased fear of communism in the United States. In 1950, China and the Soviet Union signed a treaty of friendship. Many Americans believe this was part of communist plan to take over the world. China became divided into two nations. One was Taiwan, also called Nationalist China. The other was the People's Republic of China under the Communists. These two governments had different allies, which made Cold War tensions stronger. The United States supported the Republic of China in Taiwan. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union gave money, weapons, and technical help to Communist China. Both communist countries promised to defend each other. The United States tried to stop Soviet influence in Asia. Soviet, Soviet forces controlled northern Korea and helped set up a communist government there. The United States supported a separate government in southern Korea. In the early years of Mao's rule, China expanded its influence. Chinese troops moved into Tibet and parts of India. Outer Mongolia also stayed under Soviet control. In 1950 and 1951, China took control of Tibet. China promised the Tibetans self rule, but tensions remain. The Dalai Lama fled to India, and after a failed revolt in 1959, many Tibetans became refugees. Problems grew between China and India. In 1962, the two countries fought over their border. The fighting stopped, but resentment between them continued. The Communists quickly worked to strengthen their control. China had about 150 million people at that time. The government also wanted to rebuild China and make it strong again. The Communist Party had about 4.5 million members, which was only 1% of the population. Even though they were few, they were also disciplined. Mao controlled both the Communist Party and the national government. Mao based China's economy on Marxist socialism. Most people lived in rural areas, and a small group owned most of the farmland. In 1950, the agrarian reform law divided land among peasants. The government later forced peasants to join collective farms. Each farm included about 200 to 300 households working together. Private businesses were taken over by the government. In 1953, China started a 5-year plan. The goal was to increase production of coal, cement, steel, and electricity. In 1958, Mao launched the Great Leap Forward. Small farms were combined into large communes. About 26,000 communes were created. People ate in shared dining halls and lived in dormitories. Peasants no longer owned personal property. The Great Leap Forward failed because of poor planning and bad management. It ended in 1961. A major famine followed, killing about 20 million people. After the failure, the government changed its policies. Farm families were allowed to live in their own homes again. They could sell crops from small private plots, and factory workers were also allowed to compete for better wages. Mao later called on young people to start another revolution. Groups were called the Red Guards, and it was formed. Schools and colleges were closed, and many teachers and intellectuals were sent to do hard labor. Many people were killed or imprisoned during this time. Farm production also suffered, and leaders feared civil war. In 1968, the army was ordered to stop the Red Guards, and Zhou Enlai helped bring order back to China. China continued to struggle for stability. Wars in Korea and Vietnam showed how intense the Cold War had become. The conflict between communism and democracy continued for many years. At this point, I will talk about the wars in Korea and Vietnam. These wars were part of the Cold War in Asia. They happened because of conflicts between communist and non communist countries. After World War II, Korea became divided nation. The 38th parallel divided Korea into two parts. In the north, Japanese troops surrendered to the Soviet Union. In the south, they surrendered to the United States. Two separate nations were formed in Korea and similar to Germany. North Korea became a communist industrial state supported by the Soviets, while South Korea became a non communist nation supported by Western countries. By 1949, the US and Soviet troops left Korea. The Soviets believed the United States would not defend South Korea. They gave North Korea tanks, airplanes, and money. North Korea, North Korea then planned to take over the whole peninsula. On June 25, 1950, North Korea launched a surprise attack. Their troops crossed the 38th parallel. South Korea was pushed back quickly, and President Truman believed this attack was similar to aggressive actions before the World War II. President Truman followed the policy of containment. The United States helped South Korea stop the spread of communism, and South Korea also asked the United Nations for help. The Soviet Union was not present during the UN vote. United Nations forces entered the war, led mostly by the United States, and General Douglas MacArthur led these forces. Heavy fighting continued from 1950 until 1953. In July 1953, North and South Korea signed an armistice. The war ended without a clear winner. Korea remained divided almost at the same boundary as before. About 4 million soldiers and civilians died in the war. North Korea became a communist dictatorship under Kim II Sung, and South Korea later developed a strong economy. Until today, Korea is still divided. Like Korea, Vietnam also became part of the Cold War. Vietnam was once part of French Indochina, and nationalist and communist movements grew in the country. After World War II, the French tried to regain control of Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh led communist forces fighting for independence. In the end, the French were defeated. Vietnam was also divided into North and South Vietnam. North Vietnam became communist while the South Vietnam was supported by the United States. Ngo Dinh Diem became the leader of the South Vietnam. The United States feared the spread of communism in Asia. This fear was explained by the domino theory, and because of this, the US increased its military and financial support to South Vietnam. Vietnamization was a policy to reduce the number of US soldiers in Vietnam. South Vietnamese troops were trained to continue the fighting, and slowly the United States withdrew its troops. In the end, Vietnam became a communist country. Nearby countries were also affected, including Cambodia. Later on, the Khmer Rouge took control of the Cambodia. At this point, we are going to talk about how the Cold War divided the world. During this time, countries were separated because of different beliefs and political systems. After World War II, the world became politically divided. The United States led the Western Bloc, and the Soviet Union led the Communist Bloc. Many newly independent countries became involved in Cold War struggles. Many countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America were called the Third World. These countries suffered from poverty, poor education, and weak governments. Because of this, they became targets of Cold War competition. The United States and the Soviet Union competed for influence in the Third World. Both sides gave military and economic aid. This competition often caused conflict and instability. Both superpowers used intelligence agencies. The United States used the CIA, and the Soviet Union used the KGB. Aid and secret actions were used to gain allies and control governments. Some countries did not want to join either side. They formed the Association of Non-Aligned Nations, and their goal was to stay independent from Cold War conflicts. After World War II, many Latin American countries experienced unrest. Harsh military rule and inequality caused revolutions. The Cold War made these conflicts more intense. In the 1950s, Fidel Castro led a revolution in Cuba. Many Cubans supported him. After the revolution, Cuba became a communist country. The Soviet Union placed nuclear missiles in Cuba. The United States strongly opposed this action, and in 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis almost caused a nuclear war. The crisis ended through negotiation. The Soviet Union removed its missiles from Cuba. After this, Cuba depended heavily on Soviet support. Civil war broke out in Nicaragua. The Sandinistas overthrew the Anastasio Somoza, and the United States and the Soviet Union supported different sides in the conflict. In the Middle East, religious and secular values clashed. The United States supported secular governments, while the Soviet Union supported opposing movements. The United States also supported the Shah of Iran. Many Iranians were unhappy with U.S. influence. Religious leaders also demanded change in the government. And in Afghanistan and superpowers, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. The United States opposed this action, and Afghanistan became one of the major battle areas of the Cold War. In the end, the Soviet Union withdrew its troops. Many regions were weakened by Cold War conflicts, and the Cold War officially ended in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. Today, I will talk about the period when the Cold War started to ease. This period is called the Cold War thaws. After many years of tension, the Cold War entered a time of easing. Some communist countries want more independence, and the superpowers slowly moved away from the constant confrontation. After Stalin died, tensions grew within the communist world. Eastern European nations stayed communist but wanted more freedom. The Soviet Union did not allow them to fully develop independently. New Soviet leaders allowed limited independence in Eastern Europe. Countries still had to remain loyal to Moscow, and tensions grew with China and Eastern Europe. Nikita Khrushchev criticized Stalin's rule. He exposed how Stalin used terror and repression. This policy was called de-Stalinization. It aimed to remove Stalin's influence from Soviet society. De-Stalinization encouraged protests in Eastern Europe. People demanded freedom and reforms. Communist governments were challenged by these movements. In Hungary, Imre Nagy became leader. He promised free elections and reforms. Hungary tried to leave the Warsaw Pact, and Soviet troops crushed the uprising. A pro-Soviet government was installed, and Nagy was later executed. In the 1960s, people in Czechoslovakia introduced reforms and protested communist control. The Soviet Union claimed the right to intervene, yet Soviet forces ended the reforms in 1968. Soviet Union and China ended their alliance. Political and ideological differences grew, and border clashes increased tensions. This split weakened communist unity. Superpowers started moving away from brinkmanship. Both sides feared nuclear war, and leaders looked for safer ways to manage tensions. Crises during the Cold War showed how dangerous the war could be. The United States and Soviet Union came close to conflict. Both realized confrontation was too risky. Detente means easing tensions. The United States and Soviet Union worked to improve relations. They focused on talks about arms control and cooperation. U.S. visits communist powers. U.S. leaders visited communist nations. President Nixon visited China, and relations between the U.S. and China improved. The United States and Soviet Union signed SALT I. This limited nuclear weapons and reduced the threat of nuclear war. The collapse of Detente. Protests increased in the Soviet Union. Arms competition returned, and the trust between the superpowers weakened. New tensions ended Detente. Later reforms would lead to the end of the Cold War, and the Cold War officially ended in 1991.